Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, middies. Wow. Let's go. Let's go. All right. So anyway, welcome to History with Myers here. Going to give you a little bit of a rundown on some cool World War I information here. That's your homework. So make sure you copy this in your guided notes. So we ended off talking about why the U.S. entered the war. So obviously, at first we're neutral. We're going to enter. So here's the first thing. Okay, so obviously we enter the war. A big thing that goes into it is planning. You just don't enter a war and boom, start fighting. There's lots of things, especially when you're dealing with a war that's taking place in Europe. There's a lot of behind the scenes kind of things that go into it. One is how are you going to get your troops into certain locations. Two, where are you going to send them? Three, and how are you going to raise more troops? There's lots, and how are you going to feed them? How are you going to clothe them? What industries you need to develop. There's lots that goes into it, guys. It's not just you declare war. Okay, well, great. I guess that's one thing if it's near you, but we're traveling thousands of miles away across an ocean. So, U.S. enters the war in 1917. What does a country need for war? Well, we kind of already talked about that. You need troops, you need ammo, you need weapons, you need logistics, and how do you send troops thousands of miles away? Where are they going to stay? There's so much that goes into it. You need food, you need clothing. So again, it's not just about just the soldiers that fight. There's a lot of background behind the scenes things that people don't always really realize. So anyway, today's topic is going to be the home front. Okay, so home front. So what does that mean? What does home front mean? Home front means it's the preparation for war at home. The sacrifices that government and citizens make at home and businesses to help prepare for war. So you guys see this here. Obviously, you need soldiers, so you need volunteers. You might need a draft to get more soldiers. Obviously, see here you need weapons, and then here you need to feed them. So you need to figure out how you're going to feed them. So it might be more farmers. You might need to have food rations like this. So again, as I said, there's lots that go into it. So home front is what people do at home to prepare for the war abroad. If that makes sense. Best way I could put it. All right. So here's some examples. Again, vocabulary terms. Things that I have underlined, especially, are things that you're going to need to know, that you're responsible for. So let's start off with the mobilizing military. So as I just said, we need millions upon millions upon millions of soldiers that are going to need to be sent over into Europe. And we also need more soldiers. So the military at the time, we only had 100,000 men in the military before World War I. So obviously, we're going to need much more than 100,000 men to fight this kind of war, trench warfare. We've learned about how brutal it was. So we need millions. So something called the Selective Service Act. Keep this in mind when we go into World War II as well. This is something that will be enacted. Essentially, guys, it's just a draft. It's a national military draft, Selective Service Act. So this one was any young man between the ages of 21 to 30 had to register for war. So there were over 24 million men who fit that criteria. And out of those 24 million, about 2.4 million will be drafted into the military, who will have to serve. So that's the first thing. So again, try to imagine, you're a young man, life ahead of you. You have hopes and dreams, career, you want to have a family, this and that, but boom, you're drafted and you have to fight. So pretty devastating stuff in terms of what it does to, obviously you want to serve your country, but also, just like anybody else, you have hopes and dreams. B, you need to pay for the war. How are you going to pay for all this? How are you going to pay for the men who are fighting? How are you going to pay for the weapons, things that you're going to need to fight? So a way to pay for the war is that they're going to sell something called Liberty bonds. It's basically it's a savings bond, guys. Very similar to what, I don't know if you guys have these at home, if people in your family have bought you bonds over the years. My aunt and uncle growing up, ever since I was in a baby, they buy me a savings bond every year. And basically what it is, you're basically loaning the government money now. You're giving them the $50 bond or $100, whatever you're choosing to spend. So maybe you buy a $100 bond. Well, the hope is you're giving the $100 now to the government, and then 15, 20 years later, you cash it in for $200 or $150. So you're making interest on it. They're kind of a loan. They're paying you back with interest, basically. The average American back then paid about $400 worth of bonds. Again, doing your patriotic duty. If you're not fighting in the war, then your expectation was to support the war. So doing this by buying bonds, giving the government money to help fund it. They also raised income taxes. So if you were a rich corporation, like the Carnegies of the world, Rockefeller, you were asked to pay more income tax. And not just for all Americans. The third thing they're going to do is, again, you need to prep for the war. So you need to create different government departments and agencies to help you out, help you organize this. Again, you're the president. It's too much. One person can't plan this all. So basically, what you're doing is that you're giving a specific job to somebody. So like think of it as like a school. The principal is in charge, right? Then you have your math department, you have your English department, you have your social studies department that specializes in things. You have, obviously, in your history department, you have American history. So you have your American history teachers, you have your government teachers, you have your whatever. So kind of like that, but you're doing it for war. So in this case, you have one agency that deals with industrial production, who deals with like ammo, one person who deals with weapons, one person who deals with whatever else. Then you have one agency that will deal with food. So again, there's literally hundreds of departments that help prep and plan for the war. Fourth thing is going to be propaganda. Again, you need to get people to support. You need people to sacrifice. You need people that are going to buy bonds, who are going to work longer hours. So you need to convince them to do their patriotic duty. So propaganda. So you had a department that was in charge of propaganda. Now, what does propaganda mean? It means that you're giving information that is meant to influence positive or negative and convince someone to do something. So newspapers, posters, creating radio ads, whatever the case might be. You're getting them to buy bonds and to make the enemy look evil, to glorify war, to conserve or ration, save items. So you see this right here, this little girl. My daddy bought me a government bond of the Third Liberty Loan, de jure. So again, this sweet little girl asking really appealing to other people, like, hey, I got one, you need one too. So hop on the bandwagon, ask your parents to buy you a Liberty bond. I did my duty. So yeah, I'll show you some other ones you see here. Obviously making the Germans look evil. So you see right here, militarism. This is like a German helmet. This is the Statue of Liberty or Lady Liberty, on how this big barbaric guy is trying to steal liberty from us, the Germans. Destroy this mad brute. Enlist, trying to get people to enlist to make again, to paint the picture that Germans are evil. You said this as well. This soldier looking off to an explosion in the background. We're saving you, so you save food. So they're asking people to, conserve on food. Don't buy certain items. Don't buy certain food items. Save it for the soldiers. Then you have this one. Good news from home. Tanks, planes, guns, ships. To getting people to produce more goods. If that means working longer hours, then work longer hours. If you're sitting in your dupe at home, go get a job in a factory or a war plant. Because they need them to fight. This one, a soldier running in war, and you see the American flag draped over his arm. They're running over the top. They're fighting the trenches. They're doing all these things, fighting the war, and they're asking you to buy the bonds. Again, help them fight. This is a British one, but very similar. This was appealing to women of World War II. Come work in the factories to help supply planes for the men. All right, so now American citizens, what was their expectation? Their expectation was to conserve resources. Do not waste things. So the government was in charge of this rationing program. Ration means to distribute goods, things that are scarce. So, for instance, coffee, food, water, clothing, supplies are all things that the soldiers are going to need. So what they want to do is they want to make sure that less consumers are buying those things so they can give to the soldiers, or at least buy in limit. So you see this here. Eat less bread. Again, bread is something that the soldiers are going to need. So they're asking Americans to eat less of it, ration it, conserve it. So they had this campaign, something called Wheatless Kitchen. They were encouraging people to not eat wheat on certain days of the week, or not eat wheat at all. You see this poster right here. We observe meatless days, wheatless days, porkless days. So again, same thing, not trying to get people to not eat pork on certain days or eat meat on certain days. Again, conserve, save something for the soldiers. They also were encouraging people to, so you see right here, U.S. Department of Agriculture. This is a propaganda ad for them, encouraging people to grow their own gardens. They grow their own food, and obviously those big, huge farm fields, those will be meant to give more food to soldiers. Every American was given a ration booklet, as you see here. Your name, address would go on here. You give, again, you were only allowed to buy so many items per month. So you see here, you were only given 2 pounds of sugar a month. So you bring your ration booklet, and you would give them your coupons that you were only given, and that would be your ration for the month. Your allotment. If those 2 pounds ran out, then that's all you got. Industry. One of the big things for factories, they needed to increase production. They needed to get workers working day and night. So they were encouraging people and paying people to work longer hours. And oftentimes, a lot of the unions, they weren't getting wage increases for their workers because, again, they needed to do their patriotic duty to help support the war. No strikes for unions during this time. Again, why? Because you needed war effort. And if a union went on strike, that would hurt the soldiers, which you didn't want. So, with that being said, sometimes during times of war, typically you might see a little bit of reduction in individual rights and civil liberties, especially free speech. So there was something called the Espionage Act and Sedition Act of 1917. So once we entered the war, there was a court case, Schenck versus United States, and essentially this court case will make it ruled in favor of the government, saying that it is illegal to speak, print, or publish anything that is disloyal to the United States. That if somebody is saying something or printing something that is harmful to the U.S. chances of winning World War I and to the soldiers and to national security, then the federal government can limit your free speech. And you cannot criticize the government. Again, if you're speaking about things that can hurt their ability to raise soldiers. So anarchists and communists would be prime examples of people that would be, again, their limits would be limited during this. All right, so really kind of wrapping up. End of World War I, some things that are going to happen. Let me move this down a little bit. So as we talked about, trench warfare is going to cause a stalemate. For 3 years of fighting, the front never really moves, guys. It's kind of stuck. As we talk about why. The machine guns, the technology of its time, it's going to make it close to impossible for anything but movement. They're going to try, but with the technology of the days, it's too difficult. So Germany's going to try one last offensive to push the line further west, and it's going to be unsuccessful. Now, at the time, in the East, you have something called the Bolshevik Revolution. This should sound familiar for you guys from last year in Global. But long story short, there's a big revolution in Russia, a communist takeover. The Bolsheviks were communists, and Russia will end up dropping out of World War I. Their economy's in shambles. There's a civil war going on, government takeover, changing from the monarchy to a communist organization, so that they drop out of the war. So essentially, America is essentially going to replace Russia. So think about this. For those that play sports, especially basketball, you never get a break for 3 quarters. You're constantly in the basketball court for 3 quarters, and you and your opponent. All of a sudden, the 4th quarter comes along. You're still going out there. You can't get a sub, but yet the enemy substitutes a whole new group of players who's just as good. So that's basically what America brought. They brought fresh, new troops. They brought technology, war production. That basically where the Germans were fighting for 3 years. They were dog tired. And the fact that America came in and replaced Russia and didn't skip a beat, fresh troops, made a world of difference. Long story short, the war is over. Germany's going to surrender, which will lead to November 11th, 1918, which will be Armistice Day. This is where they make their ceasefire agreement. So, guys, there'll be another video. It'll be short, but I want to hit on a few points with this, and I'll explain what you'll be doing next.